Okay, let's do a basic switch configuration. Now here, I've got this open in Packet Tracer, and I have a switch and a handful of devices connected to it. Now, at this point, nothing has been done with the switch. This switch is fresh out of the box. Go ahead and maximize this here. So let's walk through a basic configuration to give you an idea of what it looks like. So we start out here, if you remember, in user exec mode. And we know that because we have that little prompt there that says we're in user exec mode. And then here's the device name, which is switch. And by default, all Cisco switches are named switch. So we're going to go to privileged exec mode using the command enable, or if you want to shorten it, you can just do en, and that will take you there. And then we're going to configure from the terminal, so our command is config t, and that will take us to our terminal configuration. Now you'll notice our prompt changed to show we were in privileged exec mode instead of user exec, and then here when we went to config, it changed again, showing that we're in global config. Now in global config, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set the host name. So I'm going to shorten the command to host, and then I'm just going to give it the name that I want for the switch. And we're going to name this thing, let's call it primary switch. So primary switch. And that takes effect immediately, and now our host name has changed. Now, I'm also going to want to secure the device. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set passwords on my console line. So my command is line_con0, or short for line console 0. And then I'm going to set a password, and we're just going to use a default password. Don't actually use this in real life. I'm going to use the default password of Cisco. Now the other thing is on this console, I have to enforce login. So I have to tell it log in. And then anytime I try to connect, through the console line, it'll force me to log in using that password. Now, if I do a real quick, I'm going to type do show run just to show you what we've done so far. And show run is typically a command that will run not out of config, but if I put the do in front of it, it'll allow me to execute this command as if I was in privileged exec mode. Also notice, by the way, when I issued the command line con 0, it changed my prompt here, so I'm no longer in global config, I'm in line config mode. That's not a huge deal because if you issue a global config command from line config mode, it'll actually kick you back and execute it in global config. But I'm going to do the show run, and here you can see is the line we put in, hostname primary switch. And as I space down to scroll through here, you'll also see that my line con 0, I have now password and login. You'll also notice I have 16 VTY lines, VTY 0 through 4 and 5 through 15. You can configure these individually. It makes way more sense to configure them all at once. You'll notice that here login is enforced, but we have no password. So right now it's not going to allow any VTY access, and that's what we'd use to telnet to the device remotely so that we don't have to walk into the switch room with our laptop and plug up to it every time we want to configure it. So we're going to set a password on those VTY lines. So the command is line VTY, and I want to do all of them at once, so it's 0 space 15, and that's going to configure VTY lines 0 through 15. And to keep things consistent, I'm going to set the password of Cisco. Now you'll also notice when we did our show run that this is displaying the password unencrypted. That's probably not good. So what we want to do is we want to encrypt that, and we do that using the command service password dash encryption, or service pass for short. Now that is not a line config command, it's a global config command. And so you'll notice it kicked me back to global config, but it executed it. Now if I type do show run, you'll see when we get down to our passwords, those passwords are encrypted. Now, honestly, this is not a high level of encryption. That is a reversible encryption. It is not good. In fact, you can do a Google search for Cisco password cracker, and you can put in that value, and it will tell you what the password was. So it's not good, but at least it's something. All right. Now, the next thing we're going to want to do is set our privileged exec mode password. Now, we have passwords for access, and that's what these were here, console and line passwords. But then we can have another password when somebody tries to enter privileged exec mode. And that's where we get to using the command enable. So the command is this, it's enable, and then I've got a couple of options. Let me question mark here so you can see the options. I can do password enable password, and that will assign a privilege level password, which is great. The problem is, just like the password command we used here, it's not encrypted. Now, because we did the service password encryption, it will encrypt with the same level these are. Your better option is this one right here, enable secret, and that uses a much higher level of encryption. So I'm going to do enable secret class, and now if I do a show run, you'll see here is our enable secret password, and you'll see that's a much higher level of encryption. And that one, to the best of my knowledge, there isn't a password break 204 on the internet. It's a whole heck of a lot better. All right, one other thing when it comes to securing the device, and that is we need to set a message of the day banner, which basically says whenever somebody logs in, it says, hey, you shouldn't be able to access. It's like a no trespassing sign. So the command is banner MOTD, message of the day, and then whatever the first character we use is, we'll have to end with that same character. So if I do this, I'll do quotation marks. See if I can type. Authorized access only. Exclamation point, and then close it with that same quotation marks. Now everything between this first character and the last character that matches that is going to be part of the banner. Now if I wouldn't have done the quotation marks and I did the line with just authorized access only, since my first character was in a capital A, it would have ended when I got to the next capital A. So my banner would have been UTHORIZED space, and that would have been it. So think carefully about what you're going to use to start and end that command. Okay, let's see if this works. So I'm going to exit out of global config, which takes me back to privileged exec mode. I'm going to exit out of privileged exec mode, which is going to disconnect me. Now I'm still console connected, so when I hit enter, it's asking me for my password, which is good. That's exactly what I want. And then when I go to privileged exec mode, it's asking me for the password again, which is a different password. So that gives me that level of security. Also notice when I went to connect, here's my message of the day banner. So that all worked perfectly. Now, one big thing that we're missing. If you remember when we hop back through our show run here, you're going to see we set up VTY passwords, which is great, but there's no way to actually access them yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a management VLAN. Now, we're going to deal with VLANs a little bit later on. So real quick overview, by default, we have everything in VLAN 1. And what I could do is I could set an IP address on VLAN 1. Now, big thing here, we don't assign IP addresses to interfaces the way we do in routers. We assign them to a switch virtual interface. And that switch virtual interface, it's a software interface and it's going to be identified by a VLAN ID. So I could do interface, whoops, not going to work unless I'm in global config mode. So configure from terminal, I could do interface VLAN 1, and that would take me into VLAN 1 interface, create the VLAN 1 switch virtual interface, and then let me configure it. I want to do another one because by default, everything is part of VLAN 1. So I'm going to do a different VLAN. I'm going to call it VLAN 99. If you're not comfortable with VLANs, don't worry. We're going to hit them more in another video, probably next week. So I'm going to do interface VLAN 99, and then I want to name the VLAN, and I'm going to call it management. Oh, I'm in the wrong spot. Let me go to VLAN 99 configuration. Name management. There we go. Now I'm going to go back to interface VLAN 99. And now I'm going to set an IP address. So I'm going to set IP add 192.168. Let's do, there we go, 1.3. and we have to set a subnet mask in order for that to be valid. All right, so that gives me my IP address. That's on VLAN 99, and by default, nobody else is on VLAN 99. So nobody can plug into this and access it. So what I have to do is I have to add an interface to VLAN 99. Now, remember we're going to deal with this a lot more later. So grab the commands, and when we talk about VLANs in more detail, look up that video, and we'll talk more about how this is actually working. So I'm going to go into interface F024, and from F024 I'm going to type switch port mode access. Let me go ahead and type this whole thing out. Switch port mode access, and that tells it to make this thing make it an access port. Again, we'll talk about that more when we talk about VLANs, the difference between access ports and truck ports. And then I want to associate it with VLAN 99. So now, if somebody plugs in to port F024, they'll be on VLAN 99. And then once they're on VLAN 99, they can use Telnet to access this switch using this IP address. So they can Telnet to 192.168.1.3. Okay, so all of that's functional. Now, one other thing that we need to be aware of, let me go back to global config mode, and that is this. That's only going to work if somebody plugs into port 24. If we want them to be able to access from a different IP address range, which means in a different VLAN, we'd have to do some routing stuff, and we're going to get to that in a couple of weeks. We need to set up a default gateway. So the command is IP default gateway, or DEF for short, and I'm going to do 192.168.1.1 as my default gateway. All right, my configuration is complete. I went back one too many. Let's do a show run, and we're going to see right here's our host name. Right here's our privileged exec mode encrypted password. We see all of our interfaces, which we haven't done anything on yet. Interface 24 we set to VLAN 99, and we told it to treat it as an access port. Then for interface VLAN 99, we set an IP address and a subnet mask. We set a default gateway. We set a message of the day banner. And then we set passwords on our console and VTY lines. All right. Last thing we're going to do is we're going to save our config. Remember, configurations take effect as soon as you do it, but they're not permanent until you save your configuration. And we do that using the command copy, run, start. And yes, I want to do that over startup configuration, or overwrite my startup config. And we have now performed a preliminary configuration on our switch.